is forest. First one in nature. Oh, I should have saved my cyberpunk one for sign. Ah, that's fine. I can do well. Welcome to Phillipsburg. I think I want to do birch bark / a birch trunk. Because they're basically a bunch of cylinders. I thought about doing like an aerial view of forest, but I think that is a better fit for biome. I might try to do like a terrain type look. I don't know. Fungus and growth kind of feel the same. Anyway, birch bark. So should be challenging. Because the different like eyes that develop, these shapes are going to be tough. And it has this like nice flaky paper quality. So just going to break down the shapes. Aside from the eyes, the first thing I notice are these horizontal lines. And then they're like the sub-horizontal lines. So I guess these are the sub ones. And then there are kind of these like, that's not a great one, like creases that you can see here. So we have these kind of lumpy creases and then these kind of sub hatches in between. I like this one for the color reference. Kind of has all the different colors in it. So first thing is to just switch to a cylinder. And then I'm going to start with an anisotropic noise. A non-uniform blur allows. That high quality blur doesn't is asymmetry. So I can give these what feels like some sag. then I'm gonna blur it. It's in the reference. It feels like it blends into the top a little bit more. Maybe it's just an optical illusion, but it feels like those shapes kind of hang. So we have large lines, which go most of the way around, looks like. Seeing if I can kind of get a ratio that I like. A tile generator or a tile random might work better, but we'll start with this. We'll see. And then I basically want to do the same thing. Then get just kind of tuning it. So it feels about right. What I'm looking at is the relationship between these like large lines and then these smaller lines. Kind of squinting my eyes. So one super obvious thing is that these are not perfectly straight vertical cylinders. They have more shape to them than that. But because this is a straight cylinder, we need to kind of warp these shapes. Otherwise it's going to look not so great and it'll look unnatural even on a bent cylinder. You'll have to do things with the UVs to get the shape. So I'm going to do a fairly large purlin and then warp this vertically. Turn on some of my post effects, smoothing and stuff. Okay. Then there are the really fine hatches, which look to be a combination of intersecting of larger ones and smaller ones. So I think I'm going to turn essentially the small ones up. And then position, lower the contrast a little bit. And then another anisotropic noise. I'm going to rotate it. So blend this on that. I'm noticing that I don't necessarily like these bumps going across these two lines. So I'm going to try warping it. We'll probably just need like a slope blur after, which will help break up that continuity. But most of these dark areas I think are raised. Maybe not, now that I'm looking at some of these. So it actually looks like the light lines go in, which means that I have to tweak the levels first. Then these need to be set to subtract. Well, probably invert it and use darken. This is kind of working, but because the values are so bright, very few of them are actually darkening. And with that approach, I need to put the creases on top. That's set to darken, and then I need to adjust this to keep that from knocking these out. Always have reference. Because I jumped in, I made an assumption about the shape of these, and then I look at the reference and I realize, nope, totally wrong. It is literally the opposite of what I was doing. So okay. And then these kind of cross-hatchy things. that I was using add. It's probably more accurately subtract. And lower the blur, increase the number. I think I'm actually going to do a slope blur instead of this blend. See how that looks. So perhaps that happens before this. It's doing mostly what I want, but I'm trying to figure out the size. The other thing I'm looking at is how does that shape read at distance and close up? And I can kind of adjust how much there is with this mask. So I'm kind of pulling out some of this crunchiness and replacing it with the base amount, base shape. Then changing the seed and seeing how well it behaves. If it still gives what it should, or did I just get lucky? Just kind of a way to challenge and understand the nodes. You should definitely experiment and just do random things and see how well that works. But then once you get a thing that you like, mess with the parameters so that you can see what's doing what. And then you can just get a better understanding of how things work. So right now I'm adjusting parameters that I think should work one way. So I would think that increasing the X amount would increase the number of these little lines, which it kind of does, but because then I directional blur and then non-uniform blur and then blur, because they are generally shorter, after all the blurring, I end up with fewer of them. Where if I increase this, they not only get stronger, they get more common, more of them. It's a good thing to know, especially as one of the powerful things about Designer is being able to expose parameters. So knowing what the nodes do so that you can then expose that as an attribute that a user could edit. It's super useful. So another thing that I'm noticing in the reference is that around those little lines, there's kind of this blistering where it kind of flares up, and then it has that strike, I guess, as that layer of bark is starting to pull away from the surface around that growth. You can see that the sheet is kind of coming off and that line goes all the way through. So I invert this and then blur it. And subtract from it. So do invert. So if I invert it, then that pushes this that I'm blurring outward. So I get these rings around it. And then I want to do an add, I think, with this. And really low. Seeing if something other than slope blur might work a little bit better. The shapes that I was getting were just not right with the anisotropic noise. It's a lot more crunchy. And then okay. That's better. So then the eyes. The trees have eyes. Some of them look very much like eyes. But they're generally ellipse-ish shapes. We kind of have like two different ones. We have the ones that are just kind of these spots, and then we have the ones that get like the wrinkles and stuff and look a lot like an actual eyeball. So give some room. So I'm gonna try a tile sampler because it has a lot of controls on it. Paraboloids. There are quite a few on it, but they're gonna be regularly spaced. I'm hoping that by giving them lots of space, but then at the same time, lots of size variation. I can do the randomness justice, and then maybe a mass cap of amount. See how that looks. So, almost definitely gonna have to blur them so that they kind of rise out of the background. Otherwise, they're just gonna kind of drop in. So if I do any sort of warping, then I'm gonna get a real weird result if I don't do that. So see how there's that hard edge? That's with no blur. And then as I blur, that edge kind of spreads out. So I'm kind of adjusting the settings till I get to a shape that kind of has these attributes to it. Like this has kind of that whirliness. And then I also noticed that on this reference, that shape isn't perfectly horizontal. It's kind of tilted. So I'm going to go back to this and do some rotation random, which interestingly makes some of them look S-curvy, which is nice. So instead of mask random, I'm going to do luminance random, color random. So that's just with the warp. And what that is doing, for the most part, is simply making the shape move the, I guess the strikes and stuff move around the eye, which is good. That's kind of what we're seeing here. But it doesn't actually have like any of this shaping. There's a thing that I want to try. See for the color if I can proceduralize that. That's using a curvature off the normal. And areas where we have super white or super black curvature to turn that black. I think curvature smooth is just gonna, yeah, iron it out too much. Then here we can adjust the intensity. So if I use a curve, I can say basically if it's black, make it white. If it's white, keep it white. And basically adjust my contrast. And I can levels on top. And I'm going to see if this actually works for getting the color, because that'll help us judge our shapes. Because in the birch, it seems like there's a strong correlation between these really rough and high surfaces getting the white bark taken off, showing the kind of black wood kind of scarring. So that's why I'm thinking if I set this up, it might help inform the shapes. Try curvature smooth. Just see if it works. These combined though. Let's switch this to add sub. Add sub. This isn't actually black, it's like a really dark brown. And this isn't actually white, it's like a green card. Okay. So this is helping inform the shapes a bit. So headache. We need to basically add the knots. The warp that's happening is doing a lot of the work. We want to take these, probably do some sort of contrast upping and give them more shape, and then they're going to need some warp, slope, blurry something. Otherwise, they're just going to be like perfect circles. So we can try this same one. Min seems more appropriate. So we want to do this after we warp, I think. We could try before, but I think it's going to be after. Otherwise, we're going to just warp the thing that we put in there. Yeah. What I'm thinking is that we're kind of putting our growth pattern in. So it would make sense to do some warping of the knot based on the growth pattern. Also to help disrupt the shape. That one is awkward. So I'll try asking these out. We do some slope blurring to them. But then, yeah, that's better. I was going to say that the issue is that there's no interdimensionality to it. going to try doing a quantize. So in order for this to work well, it really needs some addition, subtracting in this shape. So I'm going to try introducing some cracking. This would be, or adding it, so then this would be subtracting it. Histogram shift is cool. So you can basically kind of shove your histogram around and in a way reorient the values in it. Since we're adding, this would allow me to essentially depress the middle. So the slope blur is not quite correct. Don't add anything on top of it. So the shape, the roughness, the interior quality is getting closer. Also just looking at the this shape. You could also use the curves, just kind of go up and down with it. Like up, down, up, down. Also looks fairly similar. And if I use this as a mask, that should be not. We're missing that nuance of where it's kind of this extra white bit in there. As far as the color goes, I would need to do something to this. That doesn't really work. So we're gonna try histogram shift maybe. Blend it with this. Subtract. Mmm. Really, I guess I want kind of like a histogram randomize, which if I quantize it, I could do that. Let me just try to make that pixel processor real fast. Okay, so for every pixel, take the grayscale value and turn it into a seed, and then choose a random color between 0 and 1. Here we go. Now we can do this and do let's build a random grayscale. That's going to randomize these colors as a whole. Then we could do something with that. I guess I could just multiply them together. Augment the seed. Yeah, probably augment the seed. So we'll get this. Add these two together. Then multiply by 255. So then that will give us basically a different seed, but the same one for every grayscale in that seed. That makes sense. So basically what I want to do is kind of turn off different slices of the bark, have different values. So this threshold, which is the same as this threshold. Oh no, this is where they actually ended up. So I could do that. But in any case, so I want to take something and change this so I can affect where the extra scarring is. So I use a threshold to a flood fill to a random grayscale. So I have these random grayscale islands. And then I'm doing a quantize so that I get these bands. And then I randomize the color based on that, or I re-randomize the grayscale based on that plus this, so that each of these bands is different. So then that should allow different level of nonsense there, which probably needs to be thresholded. Something like that. But we have like dark ones with some edge chunks that are missing. These dark ones with like a white ring around it. And then if I'm thresholding here, yes, I need to multiply it back with where they actually ended up. Yep. And that's set to lighten. What if it's set to add sub? So I'm doing multiply. Oh, but I'm using threshold, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so then within each of these, there needs to be layers of crunchiness. So that should be relegated to areas here that are going into here that are becoming white. So I'm just going to use dirt, blend, subtract, use that as a mask. Whoops. Use this as a mask. So those areas get crunchy. Which really should probably be this. There are different levels of crunch. So then just how crunchy those pieces are. And then they kind of need some smoothing on them, looks like. So let's try Perlin and non-uniform blur. So then we can throw some smoothing in there. But this should be rather mostly black. So then we can smooth out some of those areas. That's what it looks like in the reference. Oh, knock knock. They do get this kind of bullseye ring thing going on because of the way that they're shaped. Which I don't like. So when we go really large, you can see that bullseye happening. So I'm going to see if I could fix that by doing a warp on it. Again, trusty Perlin. Let's see if blurring this with non-uniform blur can give some of the shape. Just turn them unrecognizable blobs. Okay, I think I will use this shaping. Change this to 32-bit. Then we'll need to do auto levels here probably. Okay, so then that shaping is whack. It's not really what we want. So curvature-based approach is now breaking down once the shape gets a little bit more correct. So here, we're getting levels. And AO is getting too intense. Okay, so looks like this approach breaks down pretty fast. I'm gonna do Borderlands Birch. Okay, so we're gonna try building our base albedo with AO and curvature. We know that those heavily occluded areas are going to be dark. So currently gradient mapness is inverted. So re-invert that, start there. So bring this value up. Okay. Then we have our curvature map. So then across this, we want to kind of create that vertical noise. So I'm going to try this. It's kind of working in these areas, but it's not working at all in any of the other areas. So, that information should probably be back here. That's not doing anything. Oh, it has to go before the directional warp. That doesn't work either. I'm looking at the wrinkles and trying to figure those out. I think the issue that I'm having is their height. think the way that I'm authoring the colors is flawed. Trying to look at the height map, look at the AO, all the things that are going into this. And here, because I think the overall shapes are fairly successful, but what's not really working is the color construction part. So I have to take some steps back and figure that out. So I think I do want to do something like this. Ooh, it's getting so dark. We tone the AO down. Just want a little bit of AO and try to do most of it in color. Yeah, what the heck? Maybe these settings do need to change. That middle crease is really drawing things off. So this is alluding to the point that I probably need to use like a tile random or something like that. So I'm going to have these lines, have a little bit of randomness in it, and then, oh, maybe tile random is the right one that I was thinking. Okay, so like 2 and a bunch, square, no splitting, and I thought this had, oh, there it is. And change. So then use this here. density and skinnier. Less randomness actually turned out to be more desirable. Make these overall longer, but a bit more random. That's gross. Why is it doing that? I'm so confused why this auto levels isn't like totally breaking this. Oh, it's the darken. Then I'm going to give this a little bit more shape. Let's see if this works. Tune in, tune in, tune in. And then here, by doing auto levels, and then just the middle of it. Better, except all those little hatchies are all of a sudden coming back. Don't like the way that those look at all anymore. Those little slices, all of these. I just went in, undid a whole bunch of stuff that was working, and then I ruined it. So that's okay. what's interesting is seemingly the adjustments that I have at my disposal are not quite doing what I would expect. Okay, we're at a better balance. So then coloring the knots and lines in. These are the knots. Then the other thing that I was trying to do earlier, this part, is like little ridges there. So I do a histogram select on the height map. That's kind of what I wanted to get. Yep, gotta dupe the directional warp from that. So then this, I really want to be masking in that. Let's see if I can use this to grab some of the lower height map info. To make sure that those get the dark value. Oops, subtract. You could even use it to select some of the mid areas. So that's like the inverse, which is not useful. This is a thing that I feel like I should just redo after trial and error. So I am going to put some vertical noise in this for the color variation. Not super happy with this, but let's see if roughness can redeem this. Uh, make our own directional noise. It has this like papery bark. It's fairly rough. Um, I want to have areas that are even more rough. These areas are getting a little solid, and I'm just messing with blending modes to see if I can get something that's a little less solid, which divide does. So this might be salvageable. Kind of the issue that I'm seeing is that the kind of deep dark areas are not doing what they should. So now save. Make sure it saves. Now I think it's too noisy. And one of the other things that's happening is these ends are too square. I'm not positive on how to go about solving that. But there are too many of them. That shape is better. That shape is a lot better. I take that back. It's almost exactly the same. I'm going to use it. So then didn't solve the bullseye issue. I'm essentially changing the like macro scale of the material, making it like a larger trunk as opposed to a smaller one. So that way we're like landing somewhere in here. Because if we're going to do this right, it would be like that. These are all stretched weird. So it's kind of cool about trees is that you can really only see one side at a time. Base color, rough, metal doesn't matter. Then we tile it twice. Have to do our levels here for the height map to not affect the normal map. Up our contrast. Midpoint a little. The knots, which are third here. Take those down. Rounded cylinder looks like it tiles it twice for us. Okay. Not great, not terrible. Instead of just fixing things, I'm just going to kind of critique it. I think the albedo is fairly good. I think this kind of directional noise and color variation did a fairly decent job of capturing. I think one mistake that I made from the very beginning is that I didn't make sure that my reference was from the same type of birch tree. And I didn't really choose which one to do. I kind of mixed several, which caused some issues. I think I probably should have started with base kind of bark. It's this kind of this nice paper texture, and then put in the horizontal pieces, which are essentially like delaminations that are happening, or in some ways that area is kind of stuck, so that outer layer is then kind of pulling past it. Which I didn't do. I started with that as part of like the base shape, and that really prevents me from doing anything like this without a lot of rework, which is essentially just be redoing it. I think the normal information, the textual information that I put in the cuts and my approach for the cuts is not great. I probably should have done that differently, using like a paraboloid that's squashed, or a cone or something like that that has more of that correct shape in these pieces, and then put in the like slope blur to get the edges to be rough. I think the way that I handled the knots is okay. I think that the shape that I arrived on is not that great, and then the way that I approached doing the normal map and stuff on it, I probably should have made some different shapes and then used those and kind of blurred those to get the warps, rather than starting with just kind of a paraboloid and then trying to create a usable shape from that. I think I missed out on having some of these interesting shapes and these like cascading wrinkles. I think the wrinkles probably should have been done before the knots, but after the base stuff. Doing these pieces would be interesting, but again, that's like choosing the reference and making sure that you're doing that correctly, I guess. Yeah, so I think there are some things that I did well, things I could definitely improve. I was going to spend some more time on this. I honestly think that I would probably start over because I've learned a lot, and there would be a number of things that would just be a lot easier to do the second go around. I think some of the roughness work in there is fairly good. And there's kind of there are two levels to those hatches. There are like kind of the bark tension, and then there are kind of the structural ones. And I think that those identities are getting muddied current, like the kind of the wrinkly pieces that like stick out, and then that edge gets worn off, and then it shows those like kind of black speckles. Seeing that here, like these bits. Mine doesn't really have that. I think both in silhouette and in the albedo, because I couldn't get those wrinkles to work the way that I wanted to, which was partially because of the ordering, and not really locking those down before moving on. Yeah, a lot of it came down to just variance in the reference, and those sending mixed messages, which in this case is probably an example of too much reference. So let me just kind of pare this down. So if I was going to do this again, I would do two reference images. This one, because this is the one that like kind of grabbed me initially, and then this one for detail, because they seem to fit and have a similar like look. Like if I imagine that these little ones here, these areas that are darker, is a close-up of this is a close-up of that. I think I would have been more successful in my approach. So yeah, thanks for coming along. This bumpy ride. Streaming it keeps me encouraged to like stick it out. I think if I wasn't streaming, I definitely would have quit and not done today. So thanks for keeping me honest and keeping me going on this Nodevember. Over halfway through, so I might as well keep going. Tomorrow is fungus, which could be fun, could be gross. We'll see what we come up with. As always, thanks again. Until